Good evening, folks. I'm John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter, and with me, as always, is Dispatch Kate. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the basics about double brokering. You know, it amazes me that there are still some carriers out there who don't quite understand what's going on with double brokering, how it impacts them, how it hurts them, and the overall impact on the entire industry as a whole. So for today, we're going to break down some of the experiences we've had in dealing with double brokers, how it's done, and really what you need to look for to make you think about whether or not you're being scammed. Because let's face it, if you don't recognize that you're in the process of being scammed, then you're going to hurt even worse by the time it's over. If you can catch the scam while the cargo is still on your truck, then you are going to be a winner. It may not be everything that you expect compared to what a scammer may promise you in terms of money, but at least the scammer doesn't get paid and you're in a position to negotiate your rate. But more on that later. Kate, you got any fun stories for us from the past week?
I actually don't think so. I don't think I really had any double brokering issues. There was one that I was gonna take or considered taking, and then okay. So basically, I knew just from the MC and talking to the guy that, you know how you just get sometimes you just get a hunch that like, oh, okay, yeah, this is double brokered, pretty obvious, whatever. Well, in this particular case, it was a permit load. And
Ooh, I hate those.
my guy was totally willing to do it. And I mean, I can obtain the permits, I can do all that. So it's not really a big deal for us. So I contact this broker and I'm talking to him and being real nice and stuff. And eventually I'm like, hey, could you give me the address of the pickup? I need it to start the permit process. And he gave me the address of the pickup. So I look it up and I call the shipper and I say, hey, I think there's something funky going on with this load. I'm trying to get it set up. Can you tell me who you set it up with? And it was a Landstar load. But that was probably the worst brokerage to have it set up with. Not because it's Landstar, but well, kind of because it's Landstar, but because Landstar is so big and massive and they have so many independent agents that they literally couldn't tell me who even had that load. They're like, yeah, I have no idea. Like there was no way for me to find out, essentially. So like I called their corporate office and they're like, I'm really sorry. Yeah, this sucks. Don't take it. That definitely sounds like a scam, blah, 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 blah. But unfortunately, I have no freaking clue who that load belongs to. So if you're ever in a situation like that and you ever get a funky hunch and you have like the address of the shipper or you can get them to give it to you, you can call the shipper.
Oh, absolutely.
All you're trying to do is verify information. You're not trying to accuse somebody of any kind of fraud. You're simply trying to verify the information that you were given. So that's how you put it out there.
Well, I actually had an event earlier this week where a carrier approached me. And actually, it was a few weeks ago that this carrier approached me, but it finally got resolved this week. We ended up having a carrier who hauled a load 16 months ago that happened to be double broker, but he didn't realize until he watched our show that you have 18 months to file a claim to make sure that you get paid if you got scammed on a load. So Double Broker Bounty Hunters represented him, and we were able to get him paid on this load. It took a few weeks to convince the real broker what was going on. But we ended up winning the day, and he got $900 that he didn't think he was going to get his hands on. In fact, that money should be coming through our accounts in the next day or two, and then I'll be transferring it over to him. So that's a really good news story for anyone out there. If you have gotten screwed over by a scammer and did not get paid, don't think, oh, I learned my lesson, I guess I have to eat it. No, you don't have to eat it. Contact us and we can help get that squared away for you. So in the meantime, let me go ahead and throw down on the bottom of the screen here. If you have any questions or so, you can always text me, phone number at the bottom of the screen. And that's for when we're live. If we're not live, go to my Facebook group, post your questions in there, and we'll make sure we address it in the next week's show. Plus, you can also, if we are live, whatever platform you're viewing it on, you can post your questions into the chat in the comments section, and we'll be happy to answer those as we go. And here comes some of our first comments. You know what? I don't think it counts as double brokering within the company, though that would not surprise me. You know, since
Look,
it's all
that's why I said what I said.
If it's all within the same authority number, then it's not double brokering. But to your point, you know, scammers will scam. They will find a way, one way or another. And speaking of ways to scam, I haven't told a lot of people this, but I'll go ahead and I'll share it here. A year ago, I had the fortune of being at a round table with a couple of brokers who were discussing double brokering with a confessed double broker. He was a U.S. expatriate operating out of Eastern Europe. And what was so great about that conversation was this guy broke down exactly how he got into it, what was done, where the money came from, the whole 9 yards. And it's interesting when I listen to that story, I see how the scam is performed today versus 12 months ago, how much the scam has evolved as everyone starts getting wise to different components. So figure I'm going to take a little walk down memory lane and share with you some of the things that were said in that conversation. I wish that I had a recording of it. I'd love to play that here. I can't, unfortunately I can't, but I'm going to go through it. Basically, it all starts with getting an authority. And this is back when the scammers would have their own authorities. So they would start off with getting their carrier authority and their broker authority. And to do that, you basically had to go and create an organization. That organization really is the whole key to getting things started. Now, yes, we've seen people impersonate organizations since. That's part of the evolutionary process. But that just comes with the territory. So they go and they get their carrier authority. They get a truck VIN number out of a scrap yard. They then bribe a DOT certified mechanic to issue an annual inspection certificate for that equipment, saying that it's good to go. They take the VIN number and that inspection report to an insurance company and purchase actual insurance. Now, mind you, this VIN number is a truck they found in a scrapyard. So the truck doesn't exist. It doesn't run. It doesn't exist at all. Okay, but they got the VIN number, and that's all that matters. So they take that VIN number, they get the insurance for it. Now you've got those boxes ticked. Oh, I've got an LLC, check. I've got my VIN number, check. I've got insurance, check. Okay, now thanks to the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, as FMCSA, here's your authority. Bob's your uncle. So now they've got their carrier authority. Same deal with the broker authority. They create the LLC. They put up the financing for $75,000 bond. And the money comes from, I love this, everyone's favorite factoring company out there, Crossroad Services. Okay, so if you ever hear any brokers who sit there and say, you know, don't call us if you use Crossroad and stuff like that, that's because most people know that Crossroads Services is the financial arm that basically runs all the scams that are out there. They actually finance what's known as rigs, gorigs.com. Any brokers that are associated with the Go Rigs platform are, I would say, 99.999% double brokers. It's an organization that sends kickbacks back to Crossroad. All their carriers are easily recognizable because they use Crossroad Services as a factoring company. It just amazes me how the money flows within that organization, and it's self-replicating. So you don't just create one LLC for a carrier. You create two, you create three, and they keep creating them, like one or two a month. So instead of having just 10 guys sitting in a room in Eastern Europe doing this stuff with 10 carriers and 10 brokerages, those same 10 guys may represent over 100 carriers and brokerages. And it's all one big smokescreen. That's very important to maintain that smokescreen. So getting those authorities is all the starting point. And then from there, they start booking their loads. And once they book the loads, it all goes downhill. Now, this is back when the scammers were doing what we call the skim off the top method. There are two different types of double brokering methods that are out there. You have the skim off the top method, which is what most people were used to until about a year ago. Basically, if the real load paid $2,000, then the scammer would pay the real carrier $1,600, but the scammer would really pay the real carrier. So that way, no one got wise. Starting a year ago, when the market really got to its low point, the scammers weren't making enough money doing that. So instead of skimming off the top, they just stole the entire thing. And in doing that, what they would do is, if the load, again, really paid $2,000, the scammer would offer $3,000. And instead of paying the carrier $3,000, they just wouldn't pay the carrier at all. Take all $2,000 and run away with it. Well, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you are a carrier that's been scammed like that and you didn't get paid at all for the load, we can still help you. We can help you recover those funds. So all you have to do is reach out to us and we'll work on getting you taken care of. You have 18 months to file a claim with the real broker, and they will still have to deal with you because the law does say the final mile carrier must be paid. 49 CFR 377, folks, look it up. So once they get their authority, next step for them is to find the freight. The brokers of record, they sell their services to all kinds of shippers all over the country. That's how it's supposed to be done. Well, instead of doing that, a scammer is just going to go straight to the load board and find the freight there. What they do is they book that freight, get the rate confirmation from the real broker of record, and then treat it as if it's their own, then repost it on the board. Then the broker does everything they can, the scammer does everything they can to look like they're a real carrier. I've heard a lot of people tell me before that they have to give regular updates to brokers, and you should. That is the proper thing to do, and it does help develop trust between a carrier and a broker to do that. But as you do that, you need to make sure that it's not somebody just passing on the buck. And that's what they do. That smoke screen that I mentioned before, it's basically a filter. And you have that one guy in the middle. Some people sit there and say, oh, it's been triple brokered, it's been quadruple brokered. Folks, no, it's impossible. If you ever played that telephone game in back when you were a little kid in school, where the teacher gave a 5-word phrase to the first student, then the last student in the end had to say what that phrase was, and it was completely different. yeah, you can't have multiple scammers in the middle of this operation. It has to be just one. That way, the story is the same all the way around, and that smoke screen is maintained. Nobody asks questions because it's the same. So once they are able to put in place that smoke screen, now you get the constant requests for updates. So carriers, if you're getting constant requests for updates, there's a sign. Doesn't mean your load's been scanned. You know, it could very well be that the shipper is constantly on the broker looking for information. That's perfectly normal. But be thinking about it. It's all about customer service. And for those of you who've run your businesses for a while, you know how important customer service is. And in doing that customer service piece, again, you got to keep the communication flowing. More communication, more trust. And that's how the double brokers were able to sew themselves into the entire industry. Constant communication. They developed trust with specific brokers. You know, there have been times that I've actually worked on some cases where a broker would sit there and say, I've done 30 loads with that carrier. What do you mean they're a scammer? And I'm like, well, you've been scammed 30 times. Have you seen that, Kate?
Yes.
You know, it's about the trust. These guys are really good at developing that trust because of the constant updates. And brokers love updates. So with every other hour, they're getting an update about where the truck is and all that stuff. They're not bothering to go to look at the macro point. They're not bothering to go and call the carrier or call the driver and ask questions because the dispatcher or whoever the person in the middle is passing these updates on. It makes them look like they're the greatest carrier since sliced bread. Okay, so that's a lesson for you carriers out there. Communicate more. Brokers will like you more.
I think you actually helped me out with a case one time where I had somebody that ran a load. It was the only time one of my carriers ever ran a load, and I didn't catch it until after delivery. And I think you jumped in on that, and we ended up the broker ended up paying double. He ended up paying to the fraud carrier, and then he ended up paying to my carrier. But I think it was that guy that said the same broker or the same carrier was on like 3 other loads at that time. So he didn't want to say anything to him yet until after he confirmed that those loads were delivered. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
You know, and it's acceptable if a broker sits there and tells you something like that. You know, as long as the broker's smart to know that his load has been scammed, he's not going to make sure the scammer gets paid. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, is making sure the right people get paid. Okay, as the scam evolves from the skim off the top where everyone still got paid, it's just the carrier had 25-30% of their money stolen off the top by an intermediary party. Instead of that, and when they're starting to steal all the money out of the pot like they have been for the last year, that's really when things really started going bad for everybody, because you have a lot of carriers who sit there and say, oh, you know what, I got scammed, it's my fault, I didn't notice it. Lesson learned. No, guys, you don't have to eat that. You just don't. So step up, say something, and let's get you your money. Because the brokers have what's known as double pay liability. And we'll talk more about double pay liability in next week's show. But the bottom line is the carrier must always be paid. And if they pay the wrong carrier, that's their fault, not yours. So they end up paying twice. And there's a whole legal reason behind that. So we'll get more into that next week. But yeah, fun stuff on that. So back to the basics on double brokering. It's all about trying to understand the chain of events, how these things even come up, and dissecting how the scam takes place is really what starts you to understand the anatomy and how best to interfere with it, because it is a process. And anytime you break that process, that is when things start going your way and we're able to stop the scam. So let's look at some of the different signs that exist that a load's been double brokered. Now, I keep this list out on my website. Feel free to check that out at vigilanttransport.com. And the guide that I have on my website is more extensive on this. Basically, is the load factorable? Now, these are the signs that I use when I'm trying to determine if there's a scam on a load that I'm doing. One, is the load not factorable? Because factoring companies do a great deal of investigation among brokers. They're constantly doing credit checks. They know what brokers are good and what brokers are not. If it's not factorable, there's a reason behind it. Now, it doesn't mean that they're a scammer. It could very well mean that they're less than a year old. A lot of the major brokerage or a lot of the major factoring companies like OTR, RTS, etc., they require you to have been in business for a year before they'll factor with you. So it could be as simple as that, but it is one of the potential warning signs. If a broker wants you to set up through the RIGS platform, that's RIGZ, I can tell you from experience, that's a scam. That is guaranteed a scam. 99.999% chance it's a scam. I usually see the scammers also using a platform called TISFlow. Now, I haven't seen that in the last couple of months. I saw it extensively last year. That's KISSFLOW. I would be leery if you have a broker that wants you to do a setup using that platform. If a broker expressly forbids contact of the shipper or the receiver, that's a sign. You're an American. You have a First Amendment right. And if you have a problem, the broker would like for you to contact them and ask them first. But I have absolutely no problem calling a shipper or a receiver and saying, hey, can you verify that you're going to be open at this time? Because this is when our truck's showing up. Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. There's no problem with asking questions like that. And as Kate pointed out earlier today, there's no problem asking a broker, hey, is this the freight brokerage for this load? There's no problem asking that question. The only thing you can't do when you're talking to shippers and receivers is ask them for work. Because now you're talking about, what I'm getting at, Kate.
Soliciting shippers and blah, 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 blah. Yes.
Yeah, a back solicitation is the legal term that they use in their agreements. You don't want to get stuck in a position where you're viewed as back soliciting. If you are appearing to be back soliciting, if you're talking money with a shipper or a receiver in any way, you're back soliciting. Sorry about that. Pushing that comment up. My arm keeps hitting the button. Sorry about that, Facebook guy. All right. So be very careful about that. Do not sit there and ask for money from these people. You don't have to. That's why they have a broker. But you can always talk to the shipper and the receiver. The next one, broker explicitly directs the carrier to check in for the pickup as a different carrier. This is a huge red flag. If you are ABC Trucking and they tell you to check in as XYZ Trucking, flag. Okay. Now, I have been asked before by brokers to check in as the broker name. I mean, I had that happen to me today, where a broker, and I'll even say who it was Globetrotter. Globetrotter said, hey, have your driver check in because the pickup number is our name, Globetrotter. I said, okay, no problem. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can tell you, when that carrier made that pickup, I asked him to send me a copy of the POL, and I still looked at it just to be on the safe side.
Hey, I had one time, I'll just say it was Buchanan. Buchanan, they actually did double broker several loads, and it turned into a really big thing. So basically they double brokered a whole lot of car loads from Right Way Auto Transport. And on our rate confirmation, so I found out because otherwise I wouldn't have questioned it. I mean, honestly, Buchanan's a huge broker. One of their agents accidentally sent me their rate con from Right Way, and then so that's how I knew that it was double brokered. Like, you just sent me your whatever. So anyways, and there ended up being like 30 of those, right? But on our rate confirmation, it said, not only did it say check in as Buchanan, it said check in as the guy's name. Not the broker, but somebody else at Buchanan. And I'm like, okay, so that's, not only did you send me your rate confirmation, now you're just, it's like blatantly obvious. So
you brought that to my attention, didn't you? I think that was the first case. I think that was the first case you brought to me.
Maybe so.
And that was a big one. I remember speaking to Mr. Buchanan himself on that particular case, and we were able to help him trace that back to 3 different agents that worked for Buchanan who were doing this. And of course, he was able to get rid of all 3 of those agents. So we actually helped the broker deal with the bad element within their organization. Now, hopefully that is in fact true, because you don't know if what these brokers are telling you, even when I'm doing an investigation, you don't know for sure that that is in fact what's happening. So
Yeah.
you know, I take them at their word. If I catch it again, then of course I'll blast them. But you know, I have to give Buchanan credit. They were intrigued by our investigation. They contacted me. The owner contacted me and asked for the specifics. We gave them all the information. They took appropriate action in resolving it. I'm okay with brokers who will step up and do the right thing. Because in those situations, I'm not going to sit there and dime them out to FMCSA or DOT off the bat and say these people are trying to screw people over. They did the right thing. They made it right with the carriers that we've represented to them. They've made it right in getting rid of the bad apples within the organization. Good on them. Okay, so Buchanan gets a seal of approval from the double broker bounty hunter here. Okay. You know, just to cover myself on all legal grounds here, Buchanan's actually good. Yeah, you got to be careful if they ask you to check into somebody else. They shouldn't. You should be able to check in as your company. The rate confirmation has exceptionally vague language on or in cargo details as well. I have seen really bad rate confirmations. I have seen rate confirmations that miss a ton of information, that are just so bare bones. All you have is literally the rate and 2 addresses, and that's it. I'm sorry, there should be more information than that on. And then I've seen the ones where font is different throughout paragraphs. You know, all those rate confirmations, particularly of larger brokerage houses, they have a whole section of legalese that almost takes up half a page or more. But if the font is different throughout there for some reason, it will catch the human eye. You know, our eyes are trained to see things that are different and then focus on those differences. Trust yourself if something doesn't quite look right. Even if you can't immediately identify it, if it doesn't look right, it usually isn't. So ask a question. There's nothing wrong with that. My favorite, if a broker is aggressive in their tone and the frequency of their update requests. I mentioned this before. Remember, these brokers seeded themselves in the industry by acting like they were really, really, really good, conscientious carriers, which was a lie. But they developed enough trust that they got good at it. They didn't get caught for a long time. And that is how there are so damn many of them in the industry now, and we can't get them out. But that frequency in updates drives me insane. Now, I know some places like, geez, I can't remember their names right now, and I just did a load with those guys. Tallgrass is who I'm thinking of. Tallgrass Freight. I like Tallgrass Freight. They are legitimate people, but they want to know. They want to know, you know, when you're on your way to the pickup. They want to know when you arrive at the pickup. They want to know when you're loaded. They want to know what time you left. and then they want the exact in-out times after you've left. You know, that's fine. It's okay for a broker to ask those questions, but if the broker broker does not have that kind of reputation and they're asking questions like that, it should make you wonder a little bit, especially if they ask for a copy of the BOL after pickup. Most of the time, these brokers are the ones who wrote the BOLs and sent them to the shippers. So why do they need to see the BOL that you picked up? They don't. So there are some brokers who will ask for it because their customer wants it or something along those lines. Again, just because they ask doesn't mean it's bad, but most brokers are not going to ask for a copy of the BOL on pickup. You know, especially not sit there and demand it from you as soon as you pick up. That's insanity. If the broker does not appear to have a grasp on U.S. geography, that's a fun one. Now, I know that's also the sign of a really bad dispatcher who operates from overseas, but I caught one early last year for one of my own carriers because he thought that it was a same-day run from Boston to Chicago, and he thought it could be done in 4 hours. Now, Boston to Chicago is what? 900 miles?
Okay. It's a long way.
Long way? Yeah, it's a long way. You can't do it in one day. I thought I could do it in 4 hours. He was nuts. You know, Rob, I'm trying to give a lesson here. You know, if you want to give lessons, you can come on to the show. In fact, you know what, Rob? Next week, I want you to come. Okay, so clear your calendar next week. Come join the show. I'll send you a link next week so you can talk about double pay liability for you brokers. How's that sound? For those who don't know, Rob Pedro Peterson is one of the hosts for the Logistics Lounge. I like their show. It's a great show. You can catch it on YouTube. Definitely check them out. They are definitely worthwhile. And yes, he is a class clown, but he's a lot of fun to hang out. Thanks for checking in with us, man. Heck, I don't even know where I was. Oh yeah, U.S. geography. Yeah, the guy. I told the guy, hell, if I had a Formula One racer, I couldn't make that trip. And he just didn't get it. I ended up getting double on that load with the real broker. Yay!
Nice.
If English is not the broker's native language, again, none of these individual signs on their own mean that it's a scam. But when you start combining these, there are a lot of brokers out there who operate out of other countries. I know of several reputable brokers who have agents that operate in Europe, who operate in Asia, so that they can maintain a 24-hour operation. That's all well and good. Nothing wrong with it. But it is something you might want to stop and look into. That's all. If the rate for the cargo is abnormally high or abnormally low, folks, we all know what the market rate is for these loads. Okay. If it is more than, I'd say, 10% above market rate, you should be asking questions. If it is more than 20% below market rate, you should be asking questions. If you're in the middle there, that just determines whether or not you're a good or bad negotiator. So, but if you're either way of more than 10%, you really need to stop and look at what's going on, because there may be something else happening. Again, and I need to reiterate this, not one individual instance of this stuff does not mean your load's been scanned. It's a combination. And this cat is going to claw the crap out of my back when she jumps off the back of my chair, but that's okay. So I pretty much went through the why these are so bad, because boy, I've been through enough of these and I could use a break from talking. So why don't you jump up, Kate? What other signs have you come across in your time that have tipped you off that you're dealing with a scammer?
Mostly the same stuff, and a lot of, I mean, if they're, the biggest one is if they just like hound you. If they're hounding you all the time, give me an update, or need an update. If they call you back to back to back to back to back, that's a huge thing to me that I've noticed. A lot of now there are foreigners that are legitimate, but there are few. More often than not, they're not legitimate people to work with. Whether or not they're factorable, that is a big one. However, there are a lot of brokerages currently that are very legitimate whose credit is tanking because the market's bad for the carrier right now, right? It's also bad on the brokerage side. Not every brokerage is ripping off the carrier. They're not all taking 30, 40, 50, 60% of the load. A lot of them are being severely undercut. And because of that, they're going out of business. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's a reason not to pay their invoices. I think not paying them is bullshit, but that's a lot of what's happening right now too. They're going out of business because they're consistently being underbid, and they're not able to pay out what their current, I don't know, invoices are. So yes, if they're not factorable, that's a big thing. But in my mind, typically if somebody's new, I just don't really work with them. Like if you're not at least 2 years old, I probably won't work with you unless I know that you're legitimate. I had one person yesterday who actually, it was over the weekend. It was a weekend load. He couldn't work with my carrier because their MC was too new, but the driver has been a driver for like 20 years, and he needed to get his load moved, and he wanted us to do it because he, felt very strongly that they were capable after, 20 years of being in the business. But it was a very large brokerage, and his brokerage wouldn't let him set the carrier up. So he ran it through his own company and paid out, and everything was fine. But a lot of stuff like that gets kind of iffy too. If that wasn't such a big brokerage, I probably wouldn't have trusted it. But it turned out pretty all right. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that come into play. And like John said, no one particular thing is a telltale sign. But when you put several of those things together, it becomes pretty obvious.
We've seen this scam evolve a great deal over the course of the last year. Yes, as you mentioned, there are brokerages who are going under and who are taking advantage of the fact that they're going under just to do a cash grab as they close the doors. As you all know, the requirement on a broker's bond is $75,000. Most legitimate brokers have more than that, but if they only have $75,000, yet they have $1.5 million in loads that are out there that they still have to pay out on, and they close the doors. Well, everyone's only going to get what, 7-8 cents on the dollar, I think is what that works out to. My public math is not that good today. I don't want to try to quote that math publicly. But bottom line is you're getting pennies on the dollar in those situations. And the broker knows it. They've got the bond, so they feel they're protected. And they're going to issue out as many loads as they can so they can do a cash grab and shut down with money in their pocket. And there's not a damn thing anyone can do about it.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out is that I think one thing that I would really like to see changed is, depending on the volume, maybe not necessarily the size of the brokerage, but the volume of freight that a brokerage moves, their bond needs to be slided to match that. I think it's bullshit that TQL, as big as they are, has a $75,000 bond.
Oh, absolutely. I think FMCSA is taking a step in the right direction. A couple months ago, for those who don't know, FMCSA has issued final rules that are going to require that if a bond is paid out on for a broker, that a broker is going to temporarily lose their authority until they've put the bond, made the bond whole again. So that is a step in the right direction, but it doesn't stop situations where if a broker's going out of business and it all happens in one shot, that it's not going to protect carriers in that situation. But like I said, it's a step in the right direction. Yeah, we've seen FMCSA take interesting steps. Broker transparency is one of them. We are seeing FMCSA finally start stepping up on issues of broker transparency when they're presented with evidence of wrongdoing by a broker, intentional wrongdoing. They are stepping up and investigating. So that is helpful. It needs to be better. I'm sure we all can agree with that. Especially, and I don't want to sound like I'm anti-broker. I hope no brokers out there think that. And Pedro, I know, don't even bother on this one. But we're not anti-brokers. What we want to see is the brokers who are willing to step up and say, okay, these are my documents right here. Take what you will out of it. And then those who say, no, I'm not showing anything. I'm not going to show what's behind the curtain. The guys who aren't willing to show what's behind the curtain, we don't want shippers working with them. We just don't, because obviously if they're hiding something from carriers, they're hiding something from their customers too. So shippers, if you're ever watching this, don't be afraid to ask your broker what they actually paid to a carrier. You have a right to know, and the broker transparency law gives you that right. We'll talk more about broker transparency, if not today, certainly next week. We'll be putting that in there because it's very important for everyone to know. And clearly, Jenny in a bottle is referring to the old truck exhaust thing that used to be in my background that looked like horns coming out of my head. I happen to like the arrow that goes through your head a lot better. Maybe I actually got to wear the headpiece with the arrow sticking through. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
But when it comes to double brokering, it's the starting point of all the scams that go on in this industry. Once these scammers master the double brokering side, it then leads to the cargo theft. It leads to impersonation, both of carriers and brokers. And heck, even in the last few months, we've been watching these scammers impersonate shippers. I mean, can you imagine being a new broker out there? Started your own brokerage, you got your bond, you got a couple of customers lined up, and then all of a sudden you reel in what you think is a big fish. Okay, somebody claiming to be a middle of the road shipper, not a Walmart, but certainly somebody of size. And you're like, okay, well, I want your business. Well, what can we do? Well, I want 60-day terms. Okay, cool, no problem. We'll do 60-day terms. Okay, great. And then the scammer starts booking all these loads and then presenting these loads as their cargo to this unknowing brokerage, who then goes and finds the real carrier. Well, through their factoring program, they're going and they're paying the carriers. So carriers being made whole. Here comes 60 days, and you got about $1 million worth of money being out there, and there's no money coming in. And then you find out you've been duped by a scammer, and you've got $1 million in receivables that aren't coming. There is nothing to protect you, broker. So please, brokers, just like we tell carriers to verify who they're working with, please make sure you verify who you're working with. The bottom line is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Okay? I mean, that's just what I've seen. And it's been kind of crazy. Oh, boy. I hear Rob is chiming it up again on Facebook. Ran across one today where there's a fake broker getting hired on as an agent with a small salary and then does no work and quits after 3 months. Oh, that's a fun one. You know, those things though will go under the radar, unfortunately, because they're only stealing, I don't know, $10,000 or so at a time. Whereas a lot of these guys who are stealing money from carriers, they're stealing $10,000 a day instead of over a 3-month period. I mean, unless they're sitting there trying to sign on as a fake agent with 20 brokers at one time. I mean, I guess that's possible. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. Wow. That's going to be a fun one. Save that story for next week, Rob. Like I kid you not. I want to bring both you and Hunter on the show next week to kind of give us a little bit of a broker perspective on some of this. And I'd love to hear more of that story. But the scams that exist in this industry are so widespread. It's insane. The great news is that between Kate and I and a few friends that we have the connections necessary to reach all different levels within the government and get these claims in front of the right people so action can be taken. Now, we're not going to say that these things get fixed overnight. Of course they don't. I mean, how long does it take FMCSA to go through a rulemaking section? 18 months minimum. But the fact that we can get it in front of them to start discussing it is a step in the right direction. I've been saying for a long time, get these scammers out and just stop giving authorities out. Just FMCSA, stop issuing authorities. Please stop. Because they issue, 2,500 new authorities a week on average, I think was the last statistic I heard.
Yeah, something like that. It's ridiculous.
But as I said earlier on today's show, the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 is what makes that possible. As long as you have everything, all the boxes checkmarked for getting an authority, then the law is obligated to give you your authority. It's an obligation, there is no differentiation about where you're physically located or anything like that. That's why FMCSA is not funded to actually investigate these things before they issue an authority. So the law needs to be changed. Now, the question is, can we get those laws changed? That's the hard part, because the money going into lawmakers' pockets to get things done aren't necessarily coming from the carriers, are they?
No.
Yeah. I go to my Facebook page. There's one of our members who has a very fun and interesting opinion on how that's done. A political cartoon on my page. Check it out. It's actually pretty good. But we also said that we wanted to get into the not double pay liability. What was the other one I was talking about, Kate? Transparency. Got it.
Yeah.
Transparency. All right. Let me go ahead and hit on this real quick, because actually Jen's really excited about hearing about transparency. And yes, we do know how much it is. But the broker transparency law, and any carrier or broker out there who's not heard of this, please get this out. Take a look at it. This is 49 CFR 371.3. Okay, specifically, it's subparagraph C. That is actually what gives requires the broker to provide that information to any party to the transaction. And that's really the key here. So if the shipper asks for the information, or the receiver asks for the information, or the carrier asks for the information, the broker is obligated to provide that. Okay, that's by law. And there's certain things that the brokers are required to keep on hand. I got to find that list somewhere. I don't know if you've got that handy, Kate.
I don't, but what was the length of time? For some reason, I want to say it's 3 years that they have to keep those records, but is it longer than that?
No, I want to say 3 years is right. I'm trying to pull it up. I've got something on that here. Yeah, you got to love doing live shows, folks, because all these little things start happening.
I can look it up real quick.
Oh, I've got a slide on it somewhere. Da, 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 da. Come on.
All right. Yep, period of 3 years. So
if you have that regulation on your screen, can you share that off the present tab?
maybe if I can figure out how. Let's see. Oh, present. Share screen.
No, there it goes.
You see, all right.
Okay. So here's the actual regulation. Like I said, 49 CFR 371.3, and it's about the records that brokers are required to keep. Okay, and it lists all the different types of records that exist out there that a broker has to keep on hand. And there's some in here that are vague enough, like paragraph 5, that pretty much anything that takes place within there, even if it's not a load document or something like that, like you had to pay for a tow truck or something like that, or a transload or whatever, those documents need to be maintained as well. So it basically lists all the documents that have to be maintained. And then subparagraph B talks about how long they have to maintain it. And as you said before, 3 years, that is right. And then it's subparagraph C that is what we call the broker transparency law. Each party to a broker transaction has the right to review the record of that transaction that is required to be kept under these rules. So that is the key point here. And I've seen brokers that we have requested this from slap freight guards against carriers for asking the question. You can't, guys. Okay. There are legitimate reasons to use freight guards against carriers. There are legitimate reasons to put carriers on do not use list. But to request their legal right from you is not one of those reasons. Okay. You can really start getting a lot of negative press if you do that. Well, and I bring them up because they've tried doing that for a long time. And it was 2 months ago that they very, very publicly were shown that they do have to follow this law. And they're not going to be the only ones, I'm sure. Anytime you see something happen to TQL, you can imagine it's going to happen to anyone.
Yeah.
So this is a very important regulation for a lot of carriers to know. Look, guys, I'm not saying that the first thing you do when you talk to a broker and you book a load is you invoke your rights under 49 CFR. No, come on. We need to have some level of trust here. It's if things are out of whack. A broker sits there and tells me, this is all I got in it. I'm not giving you any more. Stop asking or anything very forceful or even unprofessional, then I might consider invoking this rule. But most of the time, I'll take a broker at his word when he says that this is all they have in a job. Most of the time.
Especially because in this business, you're trying to build and maintain relationships. And that's a big part of that.
Yeah. But at the same time, I've also seen how many YouTube videos from brokers who have really $1,000 in a load. They're trying to get the load pushed for 600, and someone comes in and says 600 and they say, look, I only have 550 in it. Dude, you got 1,000 in it. What do you mean? And I watched the guy do this on a video, and he posted that video and I'm like, okay, why are you doing this? You're one of the people that we want to push for this rule for.
You're ragging on yourself.
As much as I would love for there to be some kind of automatic thing that I know some carrier associations are pushing for, where that information gets disclosed within 72 hours of a load being completed. As much as I would love to see something like that, I don't know how much that's necessary, but it is definitely important that brokers do not shy away from this when it's requested. It is their legal obligation to provide that information when requested. End of story. Okay, and let's be clear here. This should be after the load's been completed. Okay, you don't you're not party to the transaction until after you've hauled the load. So brokers, you can't ask for it until after you've hauled the load. Or carriers, I'm sorry. Carriers, you can't ask for it until after you've hauled the load. So this is all after the fact. Thank you for getting that up, Kate. Appreciate you on that.
Oh, yeah, here, let me unpresent.
Yeah, I like that. See, we learn new things on the fly all the time. Yeah, that's another thing. I want to give Pedro and Hunter a chance to kind of school us a little bit on some of the things they do to improve their production value. They got a pretty good show. I like that. Anyway, we do have a couple more comments that are coming in. Jenny says hi.
Hey.
Okay. And I think Pedro and Hunter are going to be talking about whether or not they can make it next week. I want to try to get those guys booked, but we'll see. Because I would love to get their take on broker transparency and, most importantly, that double pay liability that we talked about before. Because, guys, let me tell you, carrier deserves to be paid. End of story. So pretty much for today, we've been talking a lot about the basics of double brokering. I know I've got a couple solo videos out there on my YouTube page that break it down. I've got a slideshow with it and all that good stuff. Feel free to check that out. But the whole point is for people to understand what's going on out there. You need to know the signs. You need to know when to ask questions. And most importantly, you need to know when to get help. If you wait until after you've delivered the load to get help, sometimes it's too late, and it's going to be bad for both you and for the broker. And I'm speaking to carriers here. If you do it while the load is still on your back, then you're in a much stronger position to negotiate for a better outcome for yourself with the broker, because the broker is not going to be losing their tail in the situation. You know, a broker is going to be happy to get control of their load when they didn't even realize they lost control. So it's a good thing to say something early on. Plus, it's a lot easier for us to deal with if you tell us early on that you've got a problem. We can solve it very quickly. But one thing you cannot do, you cannot hold a load hostage just because you think something's not right. You got to know. And there's only one time that you can hold a load hostage, and then that's when you don't have a reasonable expectation of being paid. If you have what is considered to be a proper rate confirmation, then you've got an expectation of being paid. So you got to be very careful with that, because if you're holding a load improperly, that's a crime, guys. Don't do anything stupid like that.
I feel like there's some people that are way too on the, there are way too many people that are uneducated about the subject, and there's way too many people that are big-headed, I guess, on the subject. You can't just go in guns blazing on everything. And there's a very fine line to walk in all of this, because this is business. It's business, and you are a professional in whatever it is, whatever side that you're working on. So there's a very fine line to walk in all of this. You can't go in and try to hammer down on everybody, and you can't threaten to, like John said, hold their load hostage. You can't do all that. You can't just go yelling and screaming at everybody, you know. Be calm, know what your rights are, and know what to do that's within reason to keep yourself safe and everyone else.
You know, that there's one thing that I want to make sure everyone understands from this. Regardless of how you feel about the situation, you may feel like you are right. From an ethical standpoint, you may be right. But if the law is written in such a way that you're not right, it's about the law, guys. Okay? We can agree all day long. If you're promised $1,000, you should be paid $1,000, end of story. But, you know, if in a broker's agreement somewhere, they can fine you X amount of money for not tracking or something like that, dude, it's in the contract. They've got the legal right. you know? So whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, they got the right.
And you agreed to take the load. So
yeah. Before you hammer on anybody about anything, get a professional opinion. If that means you got to have an attorney on retainer, damn it, then have an attorney on retainer. But I can tell you, most transportation attorneys don't really know what they're talking about. You don't know how many freight guards I've had to fix because a transportation attorney screwed it up. Okay. But seriously, seek advice before you do anything drastic. Stay professional. Just because you think it's right does not mean that it is. All right, that's about it for me. You got any closing parting shots there, Kate?
I don't think so. That was my biggest ending point. Just be professional and you don't want to burn bridges. This entire business is about building bridges, and especially with especially with big ones. Little ones, use your own best judgment. I mean, there are times that I've dealt with big brokers that have done something wrong, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to address this, but in a very nice way. And then there's, smaller brokerages that are seriously out screwing people and don't give a shit. And those are the people that I'm maybe a little less nice to. But
absolutely.
Just use your better judgment.
Absolutely. I had a case today. I had a broker. We had to cancel a load at the last minute. And what it was we didn't have the right equipment. We didn't have 8-foot drop tarps. I thought we did. We had 6-foot drop tarps. And the shipper rejected us. Okay. So I had to call the broker, break the bad news. He wanted to throw a freight card on my carrier right then and there. And I was like, look, I apologize. We made the mistake, but we also did not see a requirement for 8-foot drop tarps. We came in with equipment. We just didn't come in with the right equipment. I'm sorry. Is there something we can do to make this up to you? Is there some way we can help you fix this or something along those lines? And by approaching it in that manner, I was able to avoid the freight card. The guy actually apologized to me, saying, look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I'm not going to throw a freight card on you. Sometimes stuff happens. I was like, yeah, you're right. But you know what? You are right. We were in the wrong. We didn't have the right equipment. You have every right to be upset with us. But I do appreciate you, reconsidering and not putting a freight guard on my carrier. Guys,
even though freight guards are bullshit.
Even if it's bullshit. Yeah, sometimes you have to kiss ass in this industry. Okay, all the time you need to kiss ass in this industry. But trust me, it's better than having to beg for a load because you got a freight guard stuck on your breaker. Seriously, guys. Now, if you ever have any issues, all you got to do is reach out to us anytime. Contact the Double Broker Bounty Hunter at dbbh.hotline@vigilanttransport.com, or you can hit up Kate at kprice@rockdovefs.com. We're happy to help you anytime you have any issues. Please do not hesitate to contact us. We are happy to help in any way we can. In the meantime, stay safe out there. Winter is not over. There's still ice out there, still snow. I think there's some snow in the Northeast today. So please be careful where you're at. Take care of each other, and we will see you all again next week. Take care, y'all.
Bye, guys.